Shalom everybody. So, video number 2. I'm assuming after the last video everybody just sprinted out to sporting goods store or whatever your preference is and picked up a pole and maybe some line and everything. So I'm going to show you a couple of my go-to rigs. A bobber rig, slip bobber, and just a regular casting rig. I'm also going to show you, just putting the line on in case you've never done it before. So I have an empty spool here, no line on it, a little open face reel, a little light action or ultralight pole, very flimsy. And I have some 6-pound test that I'm going to use. So here's what I do. Take my line out, whether it's open face or closed face. If it's closed face, take the little metal cap off, and typically I'd always thread the line through that, but you don't have to. You can do it afterwards. But for these, you definitely want to make sure it's open before you tie any line onto this, because you're going to need to close it and then crank a whole bunch of line onto it. So you start with it open. Hold it however you want. And then I grab some line. What I'm going to do, if you recall that knot that I showed you guys in the last video, is I'm going to pretty much make that knot. I know it's kind of hard to see this line, right? But I'm going to make that knot. I'm going to make a loop. I'm going to make a second loop that's smaller. So I got a big loop, I got a smaller loop. And I'm going to feed through, I lost hold of it. I'm going to feed through this small loop 3 or 4 times, just like I did for the other knot. I'm going to grab the big loop, let go of the small one, pull it tight. Now it kind of makes like a little slip knot. I'm going to take my open reel, I'm going to slide that over top of it and just pull it down. And it cinches right down on it. Right? I use my nail to make sure it gets good and tight. And then you want to snip off this extra because it'll get in the way. So either a pair of scissors, nail clippers, pocket knife, whatever you want. Right? And you can also go through the eye hole, which at least one, which I didn't, but I'll make do. Close the bail. What I usually do is I take this and I just throw it down on the ground somewhere, and then I hold this line between my 2 fingers. A thumb and a finger, right? I'm holding a little bit of tension here as I start to turn this, because I don't want it all loose. I want it to be nice and snug on there. Not too snug, but I don't want it to be loose, because then when you go to cast, it just unfurls everywhere and makes a big mess. So I'm just going to reel in a whole bunch. If you look at each reel, they usually tell you how many yards they can hold. This is a small reel, so I don't need to do a bunch. But in essence, you want enough that if you break your line a few times, you're not running out of line, or if you do manage to hook into a big fish that pulls a lot of line out, with your drag system, you don't want to get to the end where they got nothing left, because then they're just going to break your line. And then you put all that hard work into catching that big fish for nothing. So I'll do this a whole bunch. You can just kind of keep an eye on it. You can start to see it building up out there, right? This is a small reel, so I don't need to do too much. That's good. Now that I have a bunch on the reel, now I'll take a few extra little bit here, snip it, and I will go through all the eye holes, all the eyelets here. Work my way all the way up the pole. Pull it down if you want to see. All the way up. Oh no, and then try not to do that, which I've done 100 times, because I dropped it halfway up. And because there's no weight on this end, it just slides all the way back through. usually when I put the line on the reel, I put it down through a couple of the eye holes first. Not all of them, but a couple of them, and then when I get done putting the line on the reel, I just snip it and put it back through the rest of them. Alright, and one more. Now this one I'm going to do a casting rig. Alright, so they're really simple. Alright, now I got the line in. Looks like I got a nice fish on, right? I also got it all sorts of down here. I'll just let that go for now. Put a loop in it. Wow. I got all sorts of stuff going on here today. Not my day. When it fell back down through the eye hole, it looped around a little bit. So hopefully I can get this untangled without having to do this a third time. And without getting a knot in it. There we go. Alright. So I'll make sure I got enough line out that I can comfortably work with it. And at this point, just set your pole down somewhere. Make sure you got enough slack in your line. Now, what I like to do for a casting setup is I like to have a bit of a leader still. So you can either cut a little more off of the spool, or you can just take a little bit off of here, snip it, set it aside, and save it. What I do is I take what is called a barrel swivel. It's got an eyelet like this on each side. It's hard to see both because of my fingers. So you can kind of see them both there. But it's got an eyelet on both sides. I'm going to tie that on using that exact same knot. So make a loop through, make a loop outside, hold them both open, in and out 3 times. Slide it down, snip off the extra. Now I got the barrel swivel tied to the end of my main line. Now I'm going to take that piece that was about 18 inches to 2 feet, and I'm going to tie it to the other side of the barrel swivel. Same thing, make a loop through, make a loop outside, go through it about 3 times, slide it tight. What this does is this part is able to swivel. That's why it's called a barrel swivel. So if you got anything, whether it's your lure, whether it's fish, whether it's the casting, whether it's the curl of the line itself that will cause this to want to curl up more, this helps keep that out. Because anything that curls on this end, it just swivels here and it doesn't spiral your line all the way up, because that can cause a lot of tangles in your reel. Now I'm going to put a jig on this one. So I have the jig head. This one's for my daughter. So a nice bright pink jig head. I'm going to do the same thing. I go through the eye hole of it. Right? Give myself enough line to do a loop through, a second loop not through. Go in and out of those 3 times. Slide it tight. There's that. And then with the jig, you have a lot of options for these. These are good for live bait too. Like if you buy some minnows, you can hook the minnow, say through the nose on the end of this, and then you got live bait. The minnow will wiggle. Leeches work really good on this if you want to hook a leech or even a worm. I'm going to put this little pink and black rubber body. So you thread it through about halfway or so. And go up right to the neck. And you get this pretty little setup like this. This will go through the water. That little tail will jiggle. It'll attract the fish. They'll get super excited. That's the theory, at least. So then that's my setup. So this one's for casting and retrieving. You're not just gonna set it and watch, right? But it's all set up. So I got my barrel swivel, my leader, to my jig. If it breaks, a lot of times it breaks in this leader, which is nice, so you don't lose as much line. Then you can just kind of replace the leader if you need to, or just keep tying on. And a lot of times if I'm not gonna do a jig like this, let's say I wanna do a bigger casting bait. So let's say I'm gonna put something like this on, a little bit of a spoon that'll dive. I won't just tie it straight to the line, because it might not be working much. That color or that bait, for whatever reason, might not be working. So what you can also do is you get these barrel swivels with the little attachment on the end, and you can tie this on before your jig, and then this opens up. It's hard to see because it's moving, and you can put the lure on there. I'll show you. So that opens up, so you can put the lure on, close it back up, a little snap swivel, and now it's on. Let's say you tried a dozen casts or so, and this is like nothing's working for this color. That means you can just open it back up, take it off, and say, okay, well then I'm gonna try, you know, this color instead, and you can very easily swap it back on. So the little snap swivels with the barrel, right? And then I just close it, make sure you close it back up, otherwise you're gonna cast out there and lose your lure. But it makes it easier to change your baits fast, depending on, you know, what you're trying to do. With the twister jigs like that, I usually don't. I'll keep a same color head, but I might change the bodies. But the bodies I can just take off the head and put a new one on. That's the easy rig. Not that the other one's hard, but this one's easier. The next rig I'm gonna do is a bobber rig. Slip bobber, to be exact. Here I have a bobber, but this is a clip bobber, meaning that you clip it onto the line and you cannot adjust the depth. It will just stay right where it's at. So what I'm going to do is just take that off completely. This I also have braided line on, which means that to get this other end off, I have to cut it, because it's not actually monofilament, which is fine. Alright, so I'm starting with a empty setup. All I got is the line on, as if you've already put the line on, right? So I want to do a slip bobber. You just got to make sure you understand the setup. You got to have the bobber stop, then the bobber. Then I like to do a barrel swivel so the bobber won't go any lower. Then I'll do my leader, and then say a hook, you know, and I can put split shot on there later. So the first thing I'm going to start with, I'm going to get more line out, give myself some room. Play. Is one of these bobber stops I was telling you guys about. So these are nice because they got a little groove cut into them. So you slide this, make sure the line slides through easily. You slide this onto your line, right? Slide it over a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the string, hold the knot, and just pull that little plastic piece out. Because what they did is they already tied the knot for you, right? So the plastic piece comes out, and then I take the two ends of this that they gave me, and I just pull it tight. Don't want to go too tight, but I pull it tight. Right? Now there's a knot on there. I'll trim these ends, but this is something I can adjust. I can pull the line and I can slide it, so now it's deeper. Or let's say I'm trying to fish more shallow than that, I can slide it the other way so that my bobber doesn't, the line below it doesn't set as deep. So it allows me to adjust the depth. I'm going to pull it up the line a little bit to give me room to tie the rest of the rig. I'm just going to double test how tight it is. I'm going to take my knife here and I'm going to trim these edges, these ends off. I don't want the big old tails like that, because the nice thing about the bobber stop is I can set this for like if I'm fishing deeper water, I can set it for 10, 15, 20 feet. It don't matter, because it's small enough it'll reel up into the line, into the reel, and it won't get tangled up on anything. So I got my bobber stop on there. Next thing I need is the bobber. These are the kind that got a little hole in each end, so the line can go through. Hopefully this stuff frays a lot when you cut it, so it makes it a little difficult. There we go. Boom. So you'll notice, it's upside down right now, but I'm just showing you how it works, right? The bobber can't go past the stop. So what happens is when it's on the water, the line gets pulled down by the weight, and that bobber stop holds it, and then it floats on the water. And when a fish grabs hold of what's underneath it, boop, boop, pulls it under, you know you got a bite and you set the hook. So I got the bobber stop on, right? I tightened it down, I cut the edge, I put a bobber on. A lot of times they come with these little beads. I do like to use these sometimes. I put it under the bobber because what it does is it helps stop, let's say you didn't, these barrel swivels are kind of small and stuff. It'll help stop that barrel swivel from going right up into the bobber, because sometimes they can get stuck and then the line doesn't want to easily come back out. So I'll put one of those little beads, and then it's very similar to my last setup. I'm cleaning up this barrel swivel. Is I'm going to do a barrel swivel. I'm going to do a liter of monofilament, and then I'm going to tie a hook. So I got a barrel swivel. Okay. This is the same one I actually took off the old line. So I'm going to tie that. 2 loops, in and out 3 times. Pull it tight. And this one, like I said, it's this braided line. I can't just snip it with my teeth like I'm used to doing. Right, so now the bobber won't go past that at least. Right, so I got that stopping it at that end, bobber stopping it at the other. Now I need some monofilament. So I'll grab my spool from earlier. I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I only need a couple of feet. So take a couple feet. Snip it. Grab my barrel swivel. Right. I'm gonna it's just a lot of tying this same knot over and over and over again. So I do the 2 loops, 1 through the eye hole, 1 outside of it. Go through those 2 loops 3 times. Pull it tight, slide it down. You can put a jig under a bobber, depending on what you're fishing for. It might work just fine. I like to go a lot for like little bluegill, stuff like that. So if you've been to tackle shop, you'll notice there's a lot of different size hooks. You buy the size hook depending on what it is you're fishing for. So if I'm fishing for smaller bluegill, crappie, panfish, I don't need a massive hook, bigger than my thumb. They won't be able to get in their mouth. So even if they nip at the bait, you're probably not going to set the hook on them. So I got a smaller hook. I don't remember the size. I'd have to look it up to tell you, to be honest. I think they're backwards, where the smaller the number, the bigger the hook, if I recall. So it's just the same knot. Once again, go through the eye hole, make a loop, make a second loop. All right, pull those loops open, go in and out of them 3 times. Pull it tight, slide it down, nip the extra. Now I got a hook at the end. Now, because whatever bait I might be using might not be very heavy, so bobber, barrel swivel, then the hook. A lot of times you want a split shot, some kind of sinker. Split shot is literally called a split shot because it has a little split in it. It looks like a little Pac-Man mouth. Nom 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 nom. Right? So what I'll do is I'll take my line, Zorro action. I'll go up from the hook, maybe about a foot or so. You don't want it too close to the hook because it will shy the fish away from it. And you just give it a little squeeze and clamp it down. So I got some weight on there. That will help pull the line through the bobber. So, what I did, bobber stop, right? Bobber. I put that little bead under there to help keep the barrel swivel going in it. Then I got the barrel swivel, monofilament, my leader, sinker, split shot, whatever you want to call it, and then a hook. This is rigged up and ready to go. Again, the nice thing about these is right now I'm fishing at about 3.5 feet because of where this is set. If I move this down, I could go as shallow as 2 because that's how long I made the leader. I can't go shallower than that because of the leader. But I can move this up till it goes all the way into the reel because it won't tangle on anything in there. And that would make it deeper and deeper and deeper as far as how I'm fishing. So I could fish 10 feet down, 15 feet down if I'm fishing for something that's maybe suspended out in the deeper water. And then another nice thing is you can do whatever you want for the bait. You can put a minnow on here, again, live bait, worms, live worms, leeches, crickets, grasshoppers, whatever you want. One of the things that I like to use is I found that they make these little rubber worms, right? And the nice thing about these is, unlike the real worm, you're more apt to be able to catch 5 or 6 or more fish on a worm before you lose it, right? So I thread it on so that it's kind of going the hook. I give a little bit of space, then I thread it right through the body, the curvature, and then give it a little tail. Right, and you can even take some of this tail and kind of curl it back if you want, just so you don't leave too much. Right, now this will float below your bobber. It looks like a little worm suspended in the water, and little fish will come up. That looks good. Boom, nailed it. Nailed it. And that's it. So I'll put that there. Reel it up. So I got one pole rigged up with a bobber. Tighten this drag a little. Ready to go. And then I got my other pole rigged up with this pretty little pink jig for casting. You know, this you cast out and then retrieve it back in. You can either kind of bounce it or just reel it in steady. And those are my two go-to setups. It's like I said, for the jigs, I'll remind you guys, for the jigs, if you want to change your baits often, you can get these little barrels, swivels with the snaps on them, so you can change your baits often. But otherwise, that's it. So hopefully you guys get those set up. I'm still exploring bodies of water. I'm going to start letting people know where I'm going on different days once I figure out what's where. But you know, this way you can get set up. And if you know where body of water is yourself, you can get out there and start catching something, hopefully. All right, shalom everybody.